But some people in the Catholic Church this week are questioning whether that was a true portrayal, because Pope Francis has made some comments about same-sex marriages, same-sex unions, that has got some LGBTQ Catholics kind of raising their eyebrows, to say the least. So we can talk about this now with Jamie L. Manson, who's president of Catholics for Choice, is a Catholic theologian and the first LGBTQ person to lead a national Catholic organisation. Hello, Jamie.
Well, good morning, Adam. How are you?
Well, and you're saying morning because you're in Connecticut, aren't you?
Beautiful Connecticut, yes.
Now, I am not a theological expert and I don't follow the news from the Vatican that much. So can you just explain in very simple terms what actually happened this week with the Pope and his comments on same-sex unions?
Sure. So what the Vatican was, I would say, restating was its position that same-sex relationships are not part of God's plan for humanity. This has to do with the way in which the church understands the roles of men and women. They have a very strict sense of gender roles. They also have a absolute conviction that sex is meant for procreation. And because same-sex couples cannot, biologically speaking, procreate, they are, according to the church, these relationships are not able to be blessed by the church or by God, for that matter.
And is this part of a kind of long-running storyline in the Vatican, if you like, if I could put it that way? Is it a long-running storyline with this Pope?
Yes, it is. The complication with Pope Francis is he has had an extraordinary PR machine behind him for the past 8 years. And he has made a few good noises about who am I to judge, and talking about mercy and healing wounds and building bridges to marginalized communities. So this led, I think, a lot of LGBTQ people to feel like they were going to see progress in the church. But if you listen closely to Pope Francis, and I was a journalist for 12 years, and as a lesbian, I listened very closely to what he has to say about LGBTQ people, you would hear him rather frequently exalt male-female relationships in the state of holy matrimony. So he was constantly pitting heterosexual love against same-sex love, and being very clear that he thought heterosexual love was superior and was the only kind of sexual love that God was okay with.
Well, let's listen closely to the Pope. So this is a BBC News report by the legendary BBC correspondent in Rome at the time, David Woolley, from 2013.
On the alleged gay lobby in the Vatican, the Pope joked that he'd never seen any Vatican prelate with an identity card saying he was gay. If someone is gay and searches for the Lord and has goodwill, who am I to judge, Francis asked.
The media say that they're there. I think when one is found, a person like this, we have to distinguish between the fact that they're a gay person and the fact that there is a gay lobby. If a person is gay and seeks God and has goodwill, who am I to judge him?
So would you say that's an example of him trying to sound friendly to gay people, but actually still being pretty traditional in his view of gay relationships?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the context there is important. The gay lobby was some sort of a gay mafia, so to speak, that many have said exists within the Roman Curia, which is the governing body of the Vatican, and that this so-called gay lobby was constantly pushing its agendas. So when he refers to a gay lobby, he's referring to priests. And I think what he's saying is as long as that priest is keeping his vows, that is being celibate, who is he to judge? So what he's really, in a very clever way, and I would actually argue deceptive way, restating the church's teaching that you can be of a homosexual orientation, but you cannot practice.
So does this mean that the Pope Francis we saw in The Two Popes, the Netflix film that was very popular and that presented him as like the modern, caring, sharing, loving, nice guy, was just that, a portrayal in a film rather than the truth?
Absolutely, it was. That film was quite frustrating for me. It was made through a very heterosexual male lens. It was not made by someone who was marginalized in the church. And folks like that see Francis through their own lens.
There was me thinking the worst thing about that film was that it was a little bit boring in parts, but actually there's a lot more going on there. So what does this mean for you then in the church and your role? And do you launch a campaign? Do you quit in disgust? So what happens there?
Well, I'm a special case, I think, because I've been on a campaign for over a dozen years, and I don't have any intention of stopping. So on the good days, the reason I campaign is because there is something good and beautiful and true about the Catholic tradition, and that is our sense that everything is sacred and that God is revealed in all creation. And that idea gives my life a lot of meaning. On my bad days, I struggle against the church because I know that the Catholic Church, unlike any other religious group in the world, is a global political power and has enormous, disproportionate, undue influence on global policy.
But how do you address the argument that could be made that you knew what you were getting into, you knew what the rules of the club were, and if you don't like the club, well, you can still sort of believe in the values of the club, but join a different one?
Because, as I said, it's not just a club, it's a global superpower. It has diplomatic relations with every country in the world. It has its own special status at the United Nations. It is able to ratify treaties. The Catholic Church, the Holy See, is able to influence UN negotiations. This is not a club. This is a global political force. And we have to push up against it because some of its doctrines have life and death consequences, particularly to the poorest and the most vulnerable in the global South.
You might be able to tell from the way I'm asking the questions that for me as a journalist, religion is, I'm going to admit it, a bit of a blind spot. My thing is like politics and the EU and Brexit and policy and stuff like that. And this stuff doesn't kind of come into my orbit very often. And I admit that's a bad thing for a journalist. You should have your eye across the whole world and everything that's going on. So I apologize if some of my questions are a bit naive, but if you're a same-sex couple and you're in the Catholic Church or believer or whatever the phrase we want to use is, can you get married? What do you do if you want to get married?
Well, certainly, depending on what country you're in, you could get married civilly, which there have been hints that Pope Francis supports that. There's been an interest.
So he's okay with it if you pop down to Camden Registry Office or Wolverhampton Town Hall or a nice hotel and get your celebrant in there for a civil partnership.
He hasn't said that definitively. He hasn't written that down, and he did apparently say that to a Vatican journalist 2 years ago. But this is the problem. All of these things Francis says that seem to be LGBTQ positive are very often secondhand or hearsay. So we don't know. And, with the Pope, until he writes something down, it's not official. One thing that's interesting, Adam, that's been happening the last 2 days is we've seen a bit of a revolt among bishops in Europe. German bishops, Austrian bishops, I think one bishop in Brussels has said that they are embarrassed by this latest Vatican statement and that some of them have committed to blessing same-sex couples. I've never seen bishops openly revolt for a progressive cause. And so that says something about Francis and the sense of ease that I think clergy are having in openly disagreeing with him. And that's exciting about this papacy.
That is interesting. And finally, do you get Catholic Twitter trolls? Are you and I going to get grief for even having this conversation out in the open?
Only from Americans.
Okay.
Yes. Probably only from Americans.
Well, Jamie, thank you very much. It's been great to chat to you. And also thank you for just being so clear about where you're coming from, because you're taking a very distinct position in this debate. And it's good that you're honest about that. And we know where you're coming from. And that you're actually geographically coming from Connecticut right now, which is quite exciting.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I appreciate this is a moment for institutional honesty in the church, as painful as it is. In a strange way, I'm very glad that they're finally being clear about what they think about same-sex couples. It's good to know. And we know what we have to struggle against.
Well, thanks for helping us navigate it.
Pleasure.